Today, we're diving into the mind of a true master of endurance, David Blaine. We're going to deconstruct his entire operating system. We're going to peel back all those layers of the stunts and the spectacle to get to the blueprint underneath. To find that system of thought that takes just brutal, raw discipline and turns it into something that, honestly, feels like pure magic.
Okay, let's start right here. This is the core idea. Think about it. The late 90s, we were just drowning in special effects, right? CGI was creating whole worlds out of thin air. And for 100 years, magic had just been this race. Who could build a better box, a more complicated illusion, a bigger, flashier machine? Blaine just looked at all of that and said, nope. He realized the way forward wasn't to try and out-machine the machines. The most shocking, the most unbelievable thing you could show people, it wasn't another trick. It was something real. It was the simple, brutal truth of a human body pushed to its absolute breaking point limit.
So this was it. This was his call to adventure. The moment where he just consciously chose a completely different path. This was a hard pivot away from the entire history of theatrical magic and illusion. He turned towards something raw, something real, something grounded in, physiological logic. He wasn't just coming up with new trips. No, he was proposing a whole new definition of what magic could be. One that wasn't built on deception, but on a reality you just couldn't deny.
And you can see the two worlds he was choosing between laid out right here. On the one hand, you've got the old way, right? Theatrical magic. It's all about secret compartments, expensive props, the magician up on stage acting like some kind of god who's totally above the laws of physics. The whole point is to make the audience feel small. But Blaine, he rejected all of that. He moved over to the other side. A world where the only secret compartment is inside your own head. The only prop you need is your own sovereign endurance. And the goal, it's not to act like a god, but to find a truly genuine human sense of awe.
And this, right here, this is the crucial point. This became his blueprint. It wasn't just a gimmick for a one-off TV special. No way. This was a systematic belief that he built his entire career on. The idea that true mastery, your most lethal professional weapon, isn't something you can buy or build. It's something you forge inside yourself. It's about absolute, total control over your own mind and body. So, where did this incredibly intense, almost obsessive focus even come from?
Well, to really get the blueprint, you have to understand where it was forged. We've got to go back to the beginning, back to a kid on the streets of Brooklyn who was fighting for his own psychological survival long, long before he was ever buried alive for 7 days or frozen inside a block of ice.
His early life was just a constant battle. His entire world got shattered when his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Suddenly, he's on the subway performing card tricks, and not for fame, not for fun, but literally for survival. And that's where he learned this really fundamental lesson. Attention is a currency. If you could capture someone's total awe for just 30 seconds with a simple card trick, that could turn into real money to help his mom. So you have this kid with the raw talent of an insider, but his bank account, his whole situation, made him a complete outsider. And that friction, that became the forge where his mindset was built.
And this was the turning point. Imagine feeling that soul-crushing weight of his mother's illness. It's a kind of grief that could have just swallowed him whole. But instead of letting it break him, he channeled it. He started building this internal fortress. And it wasn't built out of denial. It was built out of logic, out of discipline, and this deep, almost analytical hunger to just understand his own limits. His own body became the one thing in his life that he could actually control.
So with this new mindset in place, all of his public feats suddenly took on a totally different meaning. The first time he was buried alive in a plastic coffin for a week, that wasn't just a stunt, that was the foundation. That glass box hanging over the River Thames for 44 days, or being frozen in a block of ice in Times Square, those were his laboratories. They were like these temporary offices where he was conducting these absolutely brutal experiments, all to build something permanent inside himself, a truth he called sovereign endurance.
Okay, so out of all these trials, something really powerful started to emerge. Out of that friction from his childhood, out of the grief and the isolation, he started to codify a whole new way of thinking. He developed a philosophy that went way beyond just performance. It was about finding a way to show the world a truth that they simply could not argue with. And the first core principle of this mindset is something he called biological sovereignty. And here's what that means. It's the disciplined belief that your work, and it doesn't matter what you do, is only as good as the undeniable truth it's built on. So for Blaine, if he could master the irrefutable logic of holding his breath, or the physics of starvation, or the actual biology of freezing, well then the skeptics of the world would have no choice. They'd have to accept what they were seeing as real. Why? Because there's no trick. There's only the cold, hard truth of his own physiology.
The second principle is what he calls radical vulnerability. Now, think about traditional magic. It's all about hiding the effort, right? Making the impossible look easy, effortless. But what Blaine discovered was that the real power, it was in the exact opposite. It was in showing the struggle. It's the strategy of staying in that block of ice until you're shaking so hard you can't control it, holding your breath until your face literally turns blue. It's about rejecting any gimmick that hides the work, because you realize the work is the magic. The audience doesn't just connect with the final result. They connect with that visible, raw, human fight to get there.
And it all boils down to this, his ultimate mantra, just 3 simple words. Discipline is the only magic. And that statement, it's a complete and total rejection of the old way of doing things. It's a declaration that true greatness doesn't come from a hidden wire or some secret little trick. It comes from the relentless, systematic, and totally visible application of discipline. It is the least sexy secret on the planet, yet, when you push it to the absolute extreme, it becomes the most compelling thing in the world.
Look, a philosophy is totally useless if you don't do anything with it. So Blaine turned his body into a living laboratory. He didn't just sit around and hope for endurance, he engineered it. He started this process of systematic biohacking, creating these rigorous, repeatable systems to turn his mindset into results you could actually measure, world-shattering results.
Take a look at this. He created these super specific protocols, like this one for his hypoxic training when he was trying to break the world record for holding his breath. It wasn't just about, practicing a lot. It was a system, a 4-step system. First, define the pain. Don't just feel the burn in your lungs. Analyze it. What's its texture, its rhythm, what triggers it? Second, force mental clarity. He would use that intense pain as a focusing agent, letting it burn away every single distracting thought until only the task was left. Then he'd conduct a sensory audit. And finally, fast through failure, learning from every blackout, every single mistake, to just systematically take the challenge apart, piece by piece.
And that third step, the sensory audit, was absolutely crucial. This was a daily routine for him, a conscious effort to make sure his focus was always his, that it was sovereign. He would literally identify and dismantle all the external noise. The doctors saying this is impossible, the old school magicians telling him he was being foolish, the media constantly looking for the hidden trick. He taught himself to trust the data coming from his own body more than anything else, making his internal state the only signal that truly mattered.
So, what was the result of all this? All this systematic training, this radical vulnerability, this biological sovereignty? It was this number, 17. 17 minutes and 4 seconds, a new world record. And look, this wasn't some magic trick on a stage. This was the direct result of a philosophy that was turned into a system. And that system was executed with such insane discipline that it just shattered what we all thought was a fundamental human limit, live on TV, for the whole world to see. But the payoff for all of this brutal, systematic work, it wasn't just fame or a spot in the record books. It was much bigger than that. It was the complete transformation of an entire art form. He didn't just become the world's most famous magician. He basically became the architect of a new genre, what we now call endurance art.
His ultimate legacy is really this powerful idea that discipline, when taken to an extreme, looks exactly like magic. He proved it's not just some catchy phrase, it's a structural weapon. It's a strategy so powerful that it can make a guy just holding his breath the single most talked about performance of an entire decade. He just completely destroyed the myth that success is all about finding the trick. And he replaced it with a new truth. The only thing that matters is raw, unvarnished, sovereign endurance.
So, what does this all mean for us? Because this story, it isn't just about David Blaine. It's a blueprint. It's really a guide for any of us who feels like we're being broken by what we think are the limits in our own lives, in our careers, or with our ambitions.
What his journey really teaches us is this profound lesson. Real, lasting power, it doesn't come from faking the wonder, putting on a show, pretending you've got it all figured out, crafting that perfect image for everybody else. No, it comes from the quiet, difficult, often totally unseen work of actually building the lung capacity, of developing the real skills, the real endurance, the solid foundation that can actually withstand any kind of pressure.
So I want you to really think about this for a second. What is your block of ice? What is that one task, that one project, that one goal in your life where you've been faking it just to stay safe? Where have you been performing competence instead of actually building it? Maybe it's a tough conversation you keep putting off, or a skill you know you need to learn, or a project that you've been procrastinating on forever. Now, just ask yourself, what would happen if you committed so deeply to the discipline of that one thing that you actually found the magic in it?
Because this is the ultimate promise of the Blaine Blueprint. When you truly commit to that discipline, when you systematically raise your own personal level of endurance, and that can be physical, mental, or emotional, something incredible starts to happen. You stop being a victim of panic and circumstance. That looming deadline, that difficult client, that unexpected crisis, they all start to lose their power over you. You start becoming the master of the outcome.
So, remember this. You can always choose to perform tricks to get by. You can always look for shortcuts and hacks. But the real truth, the thing that lasts, it's found in the endurance. Your discipline isn't just about working hard. It is the code that you write day by day for your own greatness.